If you played Tekken and happened to watch EVO last year, you probably remember this iconic moment during Sajam Slam's Beat a Pro. And if you didn't watch it or don't know where this is going, well, let me acclimate you. On the left sits Lily Pichu, a content creator and streamer, and sitting next to her is Katsuhiro Harada. For those unaware, Katsuhiro Harada is to Tekken what Shigeru Miyamoto is to Mario, what MF Doom is to alternative hip-hop, or what Kendrick is to the broader state of hip-hop, that being the face of the company and culture that they have fostered. These two go head-to-head, and what happens is shocking.
Oh. Chance to work here for Harada. Oh, mix up time, doesn't get a clean hit. On that, the shoulder. Well, he can kill. He has rage. The shoulder again. Oh, the razor. Oh,
in the final battle of the final round, Lily Pichu beats Harada. This was one of the craziest moments of last year's EVO. Making it even crazier, Lily Pichu had only been playing Tekken for 4 months, which, despite saying a lot about Tekken 8 and its accessibility to newcomers, that's not what this video is about, because I noticed something else interesting about this match. Harada used a standard arcade controller, whereas Lily Pichu used a controller with no lever and only buttons. What controller was that? What tool did she use to take down the individual responsible for Tekken, and why do so many people hate its existence? Hello. If you're like me and you've taken up playing fighting games as a hobby, thank you for getting out of the lab and watching this video. Don't forget to shower today. Anyways, you might have noticed that some professionals and content creators are using a controller that looks kind of like this. That's called a leverless controller. Colloquially, it's known as a hitbox or a cheat box. You might have seen one of these and thought, what the hell is that all about? Well, this video is for you. And if you already have a leverless controller and are thinking of upgrading or getting a new one, this video is also for you. I'm making this video because I wish that I would have seen something like this when I was considering buying a leverless controller. We're gonna talk, how do they work? What are the advantages and disadvantages of using one? What's the controversy? Should you get one? And in part 2 of this video series, stay tuned for that. If you are thinking of getting one, which one should you get? Before we go into things though, we need to talk about how a regular arcade controller works. If that sounds patronizing, it's gonna make sense soon, I promise. Your standard arcade controller is going to have a joystick and 8 face buttons. You might see some controllers with 6 buttons. You might even see some controllers with 12 buttons. More on that later. Anyways, the joystick controls the movement in the video game, and the 8 face buttons control different actions. Using Tekken as an example, the joystick can move you forward, backwards, crouch, jump. Double tapping forward or backward can do a dash in either direction. Tapping up or down the neutral will give you a sidestep. Double tapping and holding up or down will give you a side walk. Tekken is a game about movement, positioning, so naturally there are some characters that have some unique movement options. The Mishimas, for instance, have wave dashing. This is a movement that closes the gap between you and your enemy, as well as threatening them with a mix-up. Conversely, if you want to create space between you and your opponent, you have the Korean backdash. On a joystick, these movements take practice to learn. A player could spend hours practicing the Korean backdash or the wave dash and still not be proficient in it.
Okay, yeah, I know. I play Tekken. I've played Tekken. I know how it works.
Get to the fucking point.
Okay, so you know how I said Korean backdashing is hard and you need to spend hours practicing it? This is how you do it on a leverless controller. This is how you wave dash. Pretty easy, huh? The point I'm making really comes to a head when we talk about the Mishima's signature move, the Electric Wind God Fist. This is an attack that requires frame-perfect inputs, combining both a wave dash and a punch. Even professional players are challenged by this move. So how do you do it on a leverless controller?
You win.
Okay, so what's going on here? Well, on a leverless controller, obviously there's no joystick, so movement is assigned to 4 buttons. The layout works somewhat like a computer keyboard. If you think of WASD controls, the back button would be A, the S button would be down, the D button would be forward, and the space bar would be jump. This is the typical Hitbox layout. However, there are controllers that even more closely mimic a WASD control, some of them even using keys from a keyboard to achieve this. While that's all well and good, that doesn't explain why this makes your character go like this. And to explain that, I'm gonna have to take you back a couple console generations ago. By the 7th generation, fighting games had come a long way since the original Street Fighter and Tekken, many considering the best 2D fighter to be Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And this sentiment was probably shared by brothers Brian and Sean Husser, who in 2010, in an effort to get good at this game and also to prepare for the upcoming release of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, designed the first prototype Hitboxes. This controller was designed to make inputs more efficient, precise, and as a bonus, more ergonomic.
Basically, we're just trying to beat the system.
And upon Marvel vs. Capcom 3's release, it did that too well. The very nature of this controller involves you having your fingers on every directional input at all times, which means that inputting back and forward simultaneously is possible, an action impossible on a standard arcade controller. And if you used a Hitbox to play MVC3, holding back and forward would mean you block both back and forward, essentially breaking the game, with Street Fighter 4 having the same issue. These games weren't designed with hitboxes or leverless controllers in mind, so a system had to be put in place in order to make sure that people weren't unfairly advantaged. The system being called SOCD, or Simultaneous Opposite Cardinal Directions.
SOCD's nuts!
SOCD cleaners interpreting these opposing inputs. There are a few modes that SOCD cleaners use. The standard mode would be true neutral, meaning that if you hit left and right or up and down together, you get a neutral input. Oh yeah, also in Tekken notation, star means neutral, meaning no motion inputs. You also have up priority, meaning that if you hit left and right, you get neutral, but if you hit up and down, you get an up input. And we have last input priority, which, funny enough, there's this whole situation where... Okay, so what does this have to do with the Korean backdash? Well, this is what a normal Korean backdash would look like on a hitbox. The issue here is that your ring and middle finger share a tendon, so as a result, this motion at high speeds becomes impractical. Utilizing the SOCD Korean backdash, the player just holds the back button and alternates between down and forward, back and forward, equaling a neutral input, ending the back, down, back, back string. This is just one hack that you can accomplish using a hitbox. Another hack that is used in Tekken is instant while running. Performing this move involves your fighter being, well, running, but using the hitbox, running becomes merely an option. Also, yes, that is Jin Kazama, and he is cosplaying Ness from Earthbound. This technique is possible on a levered controller, but the execution is more demanding, and it's in the precision of that execution that another reason to use and switch to a hitbox arises. Let's take this combo with Nina, for instance. If you've tried to play Nina, you'll know her execution is challenging and her mechanics are advanced. And while this execution remains challenging on a leverless controller, there's a level of precision you get from using a hitbox doing these combos versus an arcade stick. Also, just a brief aside, what's truly fucked up about Nina as a character though is that combo is not really hard compared to her other combos. I've been practicing Nina for like a month now, and I tried to record myself doing these for this video and I couldn't do it, so sorry. Also, one of the greatest players alive, Arslan Ash, mains Nina, and he uses an arcade stick, so it is definitely a skill issue. Okay. Tangent over. So we've established that certain motion inputs are easier on a leverless than on a regular joystick. I can imagine that if you spent hours practicing Korean backdashing and electric wind god fisting and wave dashing, that having a controller that just kind of lets you do it very easily seems like some people are taking the easy way out. And to that I say, don't be salty. I'm a firm believer that the tools that you use are only an extension of yourself. Just because a challenging move is made easier doesn't mean that you know the proper context and time to use that move. I mean, how many times have you been playing online and some dude is just wave dashing endlessly and all you gotta do is poke him and then he doesn't know what to do? There are even some that argue that using a joystick is preferred over using a leverless in Tekken. And if you look at the EVO 2024 lineup and the controllers that players were using, most professionals would probably agree. This is of course just talking about Tekken. Street Fighter and older fighting games will get there. And this is me getting there right now. Hitbox's meteoric rise to popularity sent shockwaves through the FGC, its notoriety only increasing when Daigo Umehara, a legendary Street Fighter player, made the switch himself to a Hitbox. Daigo is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Street Fighter players of all time. He's responsible for the most iconic esports moment of all time, EVO moment number 37. God damn. And here he was, abandoning tradition in favor of a hitbox.
これからヒットボックス使いたいっつうか、勝てるコントローラーを使うね。パッドが強いんだったらパッドを練習するし。
What compelled Daigo to switch from an arcade controller, something that he had been using for years, to the hitbox? It's just all the same points I made earlier in the video. Okay, there's more to it than that. The advantages that a hitbox gives you in a 2D fighting game versus a 3D fighting game are noticeable. Making a broad generalization here. Typically in 3D games on a console, unless you're this fucking game, you use a control stick to move your character. And for a lot of 3D fighting games, this translated to you using a control stick as well, unless you played Tekken, in which the D-pad was preferred. At least it's preferred to me. 3D fighting games utilizing a third axis of movement, making certain attacks vulnerable to a sidestep. Gotta drink some water after that. In 2D fighting games, you don't have a sidestep. Okay, I know that one does. We're not talking about that. Therefore, your vertical and lateral positioning is extraordinarily important. For many players, myself included, moving around in a 2D space feels a lot better when you're using a D-pad or when you're using buttons. I mean, for real, anytime I'm playing a Metroidvania or a platformer, I always prefer to use a D-pad. It just feels natural. I've seen some people mod their arcade sticks to use a WASD keyboard layout. And this guy's not playing a fighting game, he's playing Mario, a platformer. And a platformer is a game where the accuracy in which you position yourself will mean whether you win or lose. So translating this to 2D fighting games, it makes sense that a hitbox would be an input method that players would prefer. More accurate positioning is just one upside, but the way in which you position yourself is another one too. Remember the instant wall running in Tekken? In Street Fighter, you have this, and on a hitbox it is 2 to 3 frames faster. Now, while that might not sound like much, Street Fighter is a much faster game than Tekken. Okay. Talked about Tekken too much in this video. Let's compare Street Fighter to a different 3D fighting game. No, I'm not bringing up not Dead or Alive. You fucking degenerates. In Soul Calibur. In Soul Calibur 2, an average poke is around 11 frames. Compare that to Street Fighter 6, where your fastest move comes out in 4 frames. An essential tool, poking, is faster in Street Fighter. And just look at how quicker the pace is between these two games. In a game where victory can be decided by a single frame, your controller matters, despite how unsexy frame data, or frankly most of this video, is. I'm saying this to service my point that inputting your moves faster gives you a competitive advantage, and that advantage is exasperated in games like Street Fighter or Grow or Marvel vs. Capcom or insert 2D fighting game and or anime fighting game. On top of that, being able to do a super faster could be the difference between whether you win or lose, unless unless you're this guy and you're facing Daigo. Sorry, Justin, you tried your best. And on a hitbox, supers are made easy. Instead of large movements, it's a slide across some buttons. And this is included in Hitbox's marketing. I mean, let's look at their YouTube channel. Almost all of their shorts are of 2D fighting games and various special moves that would otherwise have complex or cumbersome motion inputs attached to them. And on a hitbox, they're being done with ease and speed and efficiency. So to answer the question that started this section, with all these advantages present with a leverless controller, why wouldn't professional Street Fighter player Daigo Umehara switch to one? What could go wrong? Okay, remember when I said this? Colloquially, it's known as a hitbox. Well, this is where that colloquialism, whatever. This is where the difference between a standard hitbox and a customized leverless controller becomes important. You see, Daigo's controller wasn't banned because it was a hitbox. It was banned because it was a Gaffro box. This poses two questions. Number one, what the fuck is a Gaffro box? And how is this different than a regular hitbox? The Gaffro box was designed by Street Fighter V player Yusuke Gaffro Hoshino. And this early model is a Frankenstein of different parts. You have a panel from a Quanba drone. Some of the buttons are matte black, some of them are glossy, one of them is shiny, and it's all housed within a tackle box of all things. Now, this isn't that crazy looking when you compare it to something like this, or this, even that. Okay, this crosses a line though. Okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back. Remember SOCD cleaning that whole section from like 9 minutes ago? Sorry if they freaked you out. Well, the one I failed to mention is called last input priority or last win. In last win priority, if you hold back and then you press forward, you get a forward. And if you're holding up and then you press down, you get a down. Now, when we take that information and combine it with the fact that this controller had last win priority on it, and then you look at where the buttons are laid out, there's clearly some sort of strategy here. And there was. Daigo was playing as Guile for Street Fighter V, a charge character. One of Guile's most iconic moves being the Sonic Boom, in which you hold back and press forward and a punch button. This controller very intentionally designed to make moves like this more convenient. Okay, I swear that's the last time I'm doing that. Days before Combo Breaker in 2019, Capcom released a statement on Twitter saying that controllers that didn't conform to the Capcom Pro Tour spirit were not to be accepted at the tournament. Not naming Daigo by name, but it was clear who they were referring to. Daigo, having been practicing on his leverless controller in anticipation of this tournament, was forced to use a classic joystick and 8-button setup, placing 17th in the tournament. And now he's a representative for Hitbox, so that's cool. Okay, that's enough Daigo glazing. So we answered why Daigo switched from a standard arcade controller to a Hitbox. But there's one reason I forgot to mention. It's just like personal preference, man. You're probably not as good at Street Fighter as Daigo is, or as good at Tekken as Rangchu is, or as good at Guilty Gear as any of these guys. Look, at the end of the day, people choose their controllers based on their comfortability, okay? If you just started out playing fighting games and all you have to use is a computer keyboard, then your experience is going to be different from somebody who grew up playing Tekken 3 on the PlayStation 1, in which they probably feel more comfortable using a gamepad. Some people grew up in an arcade playing Street Fighter and Tekken and all these fighting games. They used joysticks. And to those people I say, when's the last time you got a prostate exam there, buddy? Getting kind of old, aren't you? If you're playing casually or even in locals, unless your opponent has a button that lets you do this, then you shouldn't be concerned about what controller they're using. It's not cheating. Also, yes, that is Eddie dressed up as Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yoshimitsu dressed up as Samus from Metroid. Thanks for noticing. If you complain about this kind of shit, your energy is way better spent getting back in the lab and practicing your matchups. What the fuck is she doing? Also, yes, that was Athena dressed up as Bayonetta and Elisa dressed up as Denji from Chainsaw Man. Okay. And Nina dressed up as Trinity from The Matrix. Look, you were the one who was curious.
But what about all those competitive advantages you talked about earlier?
I mean, yeah, sure, but like, stick is easier with this. See this motion input? The fuck is that? And to close this, is this controller cheating or not section out, really comes to a head when we talk about the Hitbox cross-up. I told you I'd get there. This controller has two different motion inputs on it. The joystick itself and then the buttons above the action buttons. This allows for some equally as dubious motion inputs as, say, like a Hitbox.
And this to me is, it's cheating. Just looking at it, I don't know how anyone can take a look at that and say that it is not cheating.
The perceptive among you might also notice that your PS5 controller has a D-pad and a control stick too, meaning that technically you have the same options on your PS5 controller to do SOCD inputs. So why does everybody think this is cheating? And I think it's the same reason that Daigo's controller was considered cheating: convenience. Also, I don't see people in EVO winning with this controller, so... Wait, what did you say, man? Oh, sorry guys, Capcom banned it. But Tekken didn't. Hey, it's me, like 2 to 3 weeks after I started making this fucking video. If you're still here at this point, thank you so much. I hope the video was entertaining and informative. This is the first project of this scope that I've tried to complete, and if you can't tell by how unkempt my beard and hair is, it's taken a long time. I didn't realize how challenging making a video essay would be, a cogent one at that, which I can only hope that this is. With that being said, I need to make a formal apology to John, aka Super Eyepatch Wolf, for making a mean comment one time on his stream.
Daiquiri Jack, I've heard Kathy's video essays are 4 hours long and only take 1 month to make. Man, Daiquiri Jack, of all the hyper specific things to make me feel insecure about, that one just pierces right through.
If whatever the fuck this is took me like 2 to 3 weeks of working a lot, then I can only imagine how long it takes to make a video of the kind of quality that you make. So sorry. In the next video, I'm going to discuss like how broad and massive the world of leverless controllers is right now. And spoiler alert, it's a fucking lot. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to be working on that immediately after this one. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Deuces.